Welcome once again to the Icons. I'm the Sports Professor Rick Horrow. Each month, we sit down with a legendary figure in the world of sports. In this episode, our icon is a former NFL quarterback, a current TV personality, an entrepreneur, corporate speaker, and a restaurateur. This month on the Icons, Joe Theismann. Joe Theismann was born on September 9th, 1949, to an Austrian father and Hungarian mother. He was raised in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and lettered in baseball, basketball, and football in high school. Theismann accepted a scholarship offer to play at Notre Dame, where he started at QB as a sophomore. Theismann set school records for passing yards and touchdowns in a season and finished second in the Heisman Trophy race as a junior. After being drafted both in the NFL by the Dolphins and in Major League Baseball by the Twins, Theismann elected to sign with the Toronto Argonauts in the Canadian Football League. He was a standout under center for 4 seasons in the CFL before joining the NFL franchise in Washington. In the NFL, Theismann was named Man of the Year in 1982, Most Valuable Player in 1983, and selected to 2 Pro Bowls. His career ended early when he suffered a compound fracture on a Monday Night Football game in November of 1985. Later that same season, Theismann helped call the Super Bowl for ABC, has had a career in television in the broadcast booth ever since. He's owner of Theismann's Restaurant and Bar in Alexandria, Virginia, and speaks at corporate events across the country about leadership and self-motivation.
Let's go back to September 9, 1949. You probably don't remember the day, but the world does. It's your birthday. And then later on, a little bit, maybe 18 years later, you're graduating South River High. In all of those formative years, did you ever think that you would lead the Redskins/Commanders, whatever you want to call them today, to the Super Bowl and be, where you are today?
No, not at all. I mean, as a young man, I was just focused on the neighborhood, focused on the sports in the neighborhood. I grew up in a real small town in South River, New Jersey. I lived 2 blocks from my high school. As a matter of fact, the NFL did a football life on me, and I was just absolutely flattered with what they did, and had a chance to go back to the high school, see my dear friend Drew Pearson, who came in and one of the things that didn't make the show was I had a chance to go back to the house that I grew up in, and boy, walking in, I mean, the memories just hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything was in exactly the same place. The staircase going upstairs, the room my dad and I built for me when I got older and sort of stopped being in the same room with my sister. And then the dining room where my grandmother used to chase me around the table, yelling at me in Hungarian, of which I never really understood. But it was, for us, we had one of the few yards. It wasn't much at all, but it was one of the few yards where everybody would come and play baseball, stickball, football. And so it really was a place where everyone could come and be together. And it was really indicative of the community that it grew up in.
Well, so good stickball players are learning to pitch a curveball earlier than most people in life. You decided early on, even though you were drafted by the Twins, that football was your calling?
Yeah, I made the decision. The road through baseball is A, double A, triple A, and then hopefully into the bigs. And I loved baseball. Still my first love. I love football, but baseball I could sit and watch it all day long. I mean, people say, "How can you sit there? It's so slow." I don't know. Maybe it was me. It was something I started playing earlier than I did football, and I enjoyed the opportunity to be able to play. And then I played. People don't. And Rick, you cannot find a picture of me in a Notre Dame baseball uniform, but I will tell you, I played, I believe, 7 games at the University of Notre Dame. We played in a tournament down in Miami. But you cannot find one piece of evidence that I actually did that, but I actually did. And then I got drafted. I thought, the NFL was something I dreamt about, or playing football professionally. And then it was I thought a quicker road to get where I wanted to go. And I felt like if it didn't work, I could always go back to baseball. So if you want to get better at anything, you have to show up every day, and you have to learn something every day. My favorite saying is, the day you stop learning is the day you stop living.
Graduate 71 from Notre Dame, but you graduate with All-American honors in football. Tell me about the academic side, major, and how you decided to parlay that and where you thought about that in your life.
Well, I was a good student in high school, good enough to get by, like everybody else. There were other things that preoccupied your time. There were the girls and there were the sports, and academics was a part of it. And you really wanted to stay eligible to be able to do the other things, I guess you could say. And then when I got to the University of Notre Dame, I really had to apply myself. I mean, literally, I went out on 2 dates my first 2 years at the University of Notre Dame. Same girl I went out with. I had a girlfriend back home that, that sort of faded away because we were apart from one another. But I really focused on my academics at the University of Notre Dame. I had to stay eligible if I wanted to play football. I was one of 13 quarterbacks when I entered the University of Notre Dame. And I was a skinny little kid, 152 pounds. They had these other guys who were 6'2", 210. I mean, just real physical specimens. Some of them became tight ends, some became defensive backs, some became running backs, and they didn't really know what to do with me. So I just stayed at a quarterback position. But I really focused on my academics in college. And like I said, I wasn't that good a student when I entered, but I figured out how to study, and they gave me the necessary support. We had study halls if we needed it. And I shot a lot of pool. I mean, I went to class, I practiced football, I went to the pool hall, and I went to study hall, and that was my life for almost the first 2 years of college.
Now, getting back in directly, now Randy Vitajo, who's a friend, says that Jim Plunkett was one of the slowest people he's ever seen in life. Since he beat you at the Heisman, although that's not really the case, it was that West Coast bias. You deserved it. I'm just telling you. Are you faster than him? Could you run a race and beat him for the trophy?
Oh, heavens, yes. The sun can set quicker than Jim, for crying out loud. No, Jim was he was one of the really first, I guess you could say, one of those tough guys. I mean, keep in mind, he gets drafted by New England, gets the living daylights beat out of him, goes to San Francisco, gets the living daylights beat out of him, and then winds up in Oakland, and they wind up with 2 world championships. But actually, Rick, that was an interesting year in 1970. All of us coming out of college had Jim Plunkett out of Stanford, Archie Manning in Mississippi, Dan Pastorini at Santa Clara, Rex Kern at Ohio State, Dennis Dummett at UCLA, and I was at Notre Dame. And it was an interesting group because I guess the voting for the Heisman was divided in a lot of different ways. You didn't have 3 or 4; you had 6 guys that really, I think, were just incredibly gifted when it came to the position and played at some great schools that had some great records.
Your records. 25,000 yards in essence, 3,602 completions, and on. Obviously, the Washington Super Bowl victory over the Dolphins in Super Bowl 17 and the MVP. You look at all those and 163 consecutive games before the hit. What are you most proud of?
The thing that I'm singularly most proud of is I played in 163 consecutive football games. I never missed a day of work. All the years I played, with broken collarbones, broken ribs, broken hands, whether I was a punt returner, which I started my career first 2 years in professional football and then went on as a holder and like I say, then became a quarterback. But I prided myself on the fact that I showed up for work every day. And I contend this, Rick. I see so many young guys today do things that put themselves in harm's way that they can't continue to play and practice. If you want to get better at anything, you have to show up every day and you have to learn something every day. My favorite saying is the day you stop learning is the day you stop living. And for me, the fact that I was able to show up every day, I think gave me a chance to be able to grow at the position, gave me a chance to grow as a person, gave me a chance to grow as a quarterback. I'll give you a classic example. Zach Wilson, who's not dressing now for the Jets. Beginning of the season, first preseason game, he's 2 yards from the sidelines, and instead of running out of bounds, now keep in mind, he's the starting quarterback. He's the guy. He cuts back up to try and pick up 2 more yards in the first preseason game, hurts his knee, and he's gone for almost a month. I mean, these are the kind of things that are you try and impress on young guys, is you being out there learning the position on a daily basis is so vital and important to you having longevity in this game. There are enough people going to hit you. There's no reason to go out and try and get people to hit you. Now you see guys sliding all the time, protecting themselves. They understand it. But here was a young guy who was going to pick up a few more yards in a preseason game. when you are the guy. And those are the things that, I'm sure he's going to learn going forward now, but that set him back, and so now he's not even dressing. And then on that night, I found out that material things in this life really don't mean anything because they can be gone in an instant. And that the important thing is that you understand where you fit into society, where you fit into a team concept, and what your role actually is.
So it's 1985, and you're on Monday Night Football. It's the turnaway hit that has affected television another way, because they showed that hit and your abrupt ending of your career maybe 9,000 times in a 2-minute period. And now it's one of those turnaway things where the producer and director will say, we'll show it maybe once, so we're not going to do it again of any similar things. How do you put that in perspective? Now, remember, this is the guy that played 163 consecutive games, and you did protect yourself, but that one moment. So, reflect back on that.
Well, it's one moment. It's that one moment in time, and I agree with you. I think my injury basically changed the way producers present injuries nowadays. They immediately go to commercial for an assessment, and I think it's great for the family members. It's great for the fans. I mean, there's no reason to have to relive that for so many people. And for me, there's an ironic part to it, because I was there the night Alex Smith got hurt, which was exactly 33 years after my injury, almost the same exact spot on the field. Both of our starting left tackles weren't in the game. We were both taken out by defensive players of the year, he by J.J. Watt, me by Lawrence Taylor. The synergy is just absolutely incredible on that night. Alex and I have spent a lot of time in conversation, and thank goodness he's doing extremely well. And, he's doing well in television, and came back and played. And I'll never forget when they came back and played against the Rams. I think it was Aaron Donald jumped on his back, and I started to cringe thinking, oh my gosh, just let him be okay. And he got up and he was fine. And, I think Alex felt like it was ready to go, and I certainly felt that way too. But that night was more than just an injury. It was more than just doing something in the world of television. It really became a point in my life which was very critical, because I had become very consumed with my own abilities. My ego had gotten large. I felt like I was really good. And, this football team was my football team, and I was the one that was the star. And then on that night, I found out that material things in this life really don't mean anything because they can be gone in an instant. And that the important thing is that you understand where you fit into society, where you fit into a team concept, and what your role actually is. And all we are as quarterbacks is facilitators. We just facilitate, get the ball out of your hand the ball off, make plays, move the ball around, give people a chance to be able to do their stuff. But like I said, I got sort of full of myself. And that night, I just got my feet slammed back down on the ground, and had to really start over as a person. Didn't really understand the world of business. And that's what I basically talk about in my presentations, is the relationship between the world of sports, the world of business, and our own lives. And I wrote a book called How to Be a Champion Every Day, which basically capsules a lot of those stories, because my life's sort of been one story after another.
Yeah. And, the elevator speech about the book, after having glanced at it, and I need to read it and memorize it word for word. I've been told by a lot of people I better do that, or you're going to come after me.
You don't need to do that.
Yeah, I do. Harry Rhodes tells me I need to do it. So the bottom line of the life lessons is survive, thrive, and learn from each story as you go forward. I think I'm taking away from that.
Yeah, that is what it is every experience we have in our life, good and or bad, is something that you have to learn from. And I think if you're unwilling to look back, I'm not a rear view mirror guy. I like to look forward, but I think you have to look at the experiences that you've gone through to allow you to grow, to allow you to get better as a person, to allow you to get better in the world of business and or the world of sports. And so that's why we sit down during the week, in the early part of the week, and we look at the game that we just played. How can we correct the mistakes that we made? How can we be better at what we do? Can we prepare better? That's another thing. Preparation is so vitally important. It's like you and I having a chance to visit, and you basically understanding what my life is about, and to be able to have the communications that is necessary to grow. People will come up and say, "Oh, like you were my hero growing up. You were my dad's hero." And then they start to say, "My grandfather." Say, "Whoa, time out. Okay, let's
That's
just
enough.
let's not quite go
Yeah.
that far back."
Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, meaning Bob Greasy and you, fall into an interesting category where there's a little bit of lamenting. The kids now, they don't remember me from football. They remember me from TV, from him, ESPN, even his son, from you, ESPN and the NFL Network. Reflect back on those years.
Well, it's funny. Thank goodness for Google.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
That's true.
that's what I tell young people all the time. They look at me and say, in
Who are you?
1982, we won the world championship. It's like, my gosh, it may as well be, 1900.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
come over with Columbus?
Yeah.
Did you sail a ship over here? How did you get to this? How did it all start for you? But yeah, I mean, like I say, thank goodness for the internet, because people go back and look at it. I mean, just the injury that we were talking about, I think's been viewed close to 20 million times. And when somebody gets hurt, it's like, oh, that's like Joe's injury. There's a reference to it. And so for me, it's funny when kids come up. Yeah, and this is really interesting, Rick, because people will come up and say, "Oh, like you were my hero growing up. You were my dad's hero." And then they start to say, "My grandfather." Say, "Whoa, time out. Okay, let's
That's
just
enough.
let's not quite go
Yeah.
that far back." But
Sammy Baugh. Right.
they
Exactly.
do.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing too, is that term hero. Um, People are very kind, and they come up to us as athletes, men, women, athletes, and they say, "You were my hero," and it's very kind, and we appreciate it. But all we really are is individuals that God gave a gift to. He gave me the ability to throw or run or move around or jump, whatever gift is given to an athlete. The true heroes in this world today are the men and women that put on a uniform and defend our country. The men and women that fight fires, the police officers, the first responders. These are the true heroes, because when I go to work, there's not the chance of me not coming home. But yet, all these other people that in my mind are heroes are the ones that go out and put their life on the line so that you and I can do exactly what we're doing, sitting here and having a conversation, talking about life, talking about the world. And it's because of them that we're given that opportunity. And that's why, to me, whenever I see a police officer, whenever I see someone in uniform, I just simply say thank you. And you know what scares me, Rick, is they'll say so often to me, "I really appreciate that," and we just don't hear it much at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And whether it ought to scare a lot more people is left for another day. But I was just going to ask you about the perception of athletes and the gift. Now, they don't have to be Mother Teresa, but you athletes have a platform that not too many people have. Comment on Charles Barkley's kind of "we're not role model" theories. What do you think an obligation of an athlete is relative to giving back, to making statements, to giving dollars to charity, those kind of things? Obligation as opposed to preference, for example.
And, I wouldn't necessarily call it an obligation. It's a choice of an individual to be able to live a life there's a certain way. You want to live a life that's a good life. You care about people. You do the right thing. Charles is very outspoken on a lot of different things. And he's funny as all get out. We spent a lot of time together over the years at the American Century Tournament out in Lake Tahoe, California, and have or Nevada, I should say, or they're right on the border, so you can go out of the state. It doesn't really matter. But Charles, it looks at life in a very candid way, and I mean, there's no doubt where he stands on certain things and the way he feels about things. I think when it comes to role models, is you have to just be a good person. That's the bottom line. Just try and be a good person. Try and help people if you can in some way, shape, or form. Try and influence people in a positive way in some way, shape, or form. And then they can make adjustments. But when it comes to, whether you're a role model or not a role model, those are things that people decide about you, not necessarily something you need to be considering as far as thought processes go into it. And I think there's three very specific reasons why the NFL will continue to be the dominant sport in this country in particular.
How is the NFL brand looking today, broadly defined?
I think it's stronger than ever. And I think there's three very specific reasons why the NFL will continue to be the dominant sport in this country in particular. Number one, you have the rabid fans. They love, your fans. That's their football team. You're ours. They take possession of you. They don't talk about it as a third party. It's part of the family. I'm a fan of this team. I'm a fan of that team. So you have the fans. Then you have fantasy football. If you're in an office and let's say I'm really not a football fan, but everybody's participating in this fantasy football league, so I'm going to get involved. So now all of a sudden you increase the base of fans just because they want to be a part of something. And then the biggest thing, and that's come into it in the most recent years here in the last 2 or 3 years, and that's gambling. I mean, you look at the ads on television when it comes to football games. Look at the ads for every sport. And it's predominantly all the gaming industry, all the different types of ways to bet. So with the fantasy football and gaming, football continues to be a very, very attractive product for people to be able to enjoy, get excited about, get behind, and get involved in.
That's very well put. Joe Theismann, it's interesting because in the mid-'80s, as a lifetime Dolphin fan, I came back here because of the Dolphins. I couldn't stand you. And now I love you. Thank you very much, Joe Theismann. Really enjoyed being with you.
Well, Rick, thank you. I will not apologize for you hating me because if you liked me, I didn't do my job properly.
There's a long string of people in South Florida who feel exactly the same way, believe me.